So how have you been dealing with the Chinese virus?
I prefer to call it COVID-19. It has certainly stretched me and stretched the parishioners, those that I'm blessed to serve. I found myself very resolute in my prayer life, very resolute in my studying, in my elaborating on scriptures and bringing them to life for others so they can find hope. I have found comfort in the Old Testament narratives and looking at the Babylonian exile and looking at all the grief and difficulty the children of Israel went through at that time. And I have related much of that to what we are going through at this time with a firm resolve that God will make a way in God's own time. It has most certainly been difficult. I have lost friends. I have friends that have lost spouses and parents as a result of COVID-19. So it has not been an easy time. But from a fundamental and a theological position, I believe this too shall pass because the God we serve is able.
Do you think it's good that they have kept the churches closed for so long?
I think across the board, you have to take prophylactic measures, not just with churches, but obviously with any group where you have large assemblies, because so many people are asymptomatic and breathing, being in close proximity with others, especially in large crowds. It's a recipe for disaster. I think churches are a little bit different than some other places. And I think churches can be super spreaders of the virus if we are not careful. And here is what I mean by that. It is different. It's a different experience in coming within a 6 foot proximity of someone in a shopping center or in a restaurant
Yeah.
than it is in a worship experience where there is extemporaneous movement, there's extemporaneous speaking, there's exchanging of droplets when they're singing, dancing, praise, and so forth. Those are each and every one of those is an occasion whereby the virus can be spread almost indiscriminately. So churches are a little different, I think, at least from other avenues of social exchange.
You said that you know you have friends and you know people who've died from the Chinese virus. They are now, and it's been reported over and over again that hospitals are saying that everybody and their mama are dying from the Chinese virus because they get money every time they diagnose the person as dying with that. Nobody died from cancer, bone diseases, or anything at this point. Do you believe them when they say those people died with Chinese virus rather than other causes?
So again, I would prefer to call it COVID-19, but I respect your interpretation. Those people that I know, I grew up in New Orleans. If you will recall, when the virus initially manifest in very large among large groups of folks, New Orleans was one of the cities that was most adversely hit. Because I am serving in Durham, North Carolina now, but because I'm from New Orleans, many of the people I grew up with, many of the people I'm still in social contact with, I believe contracted the virus as a result of the Mardi Gras holiday and the many people who came into the city during that time period. I personally have friends who lost their parents and who lost spouses as a result of COVID-19, not cancer, not a stroke, nothing else but COVID-19. 2020 has been a rough year, and I can assure you, as we are now having passed 21 to 200, I forget the last benchmark that we passed in the deaths, and I saw the news this morning. But I can assure you, I lost my mother earlier this year as a result of a second stroke. I have a friend who lost his mother as a result of cancer. COVID-19 is real, and I have no reason to believe that those numbers are falsely reported. And if anyone is saying that there is more of a profit margin because they're reporting deaths from one cause or another, I would check the source on that.
Knowing that the government is trying to control us this political season, and they are trying to keep fear in the people in order to win this next election, why would you trust them about the Chinese
Well,
virus?
I guess it depends on your interpretation of who is attempting to instill the fear. I believe there have been rather many attempts to instill fear from the current occupant of the White House for the very reasons that you referenced. An attempt to stay lockstep, not make change. People are afraid of this, that, and the other, so you want to stay right where you are rather than make change.
But it's primarily happening in the Democrat-controlled states where they're controlling the people with this fear of Chinese virus rather than the Republican-controlled states. So it would have to be
I don't
more
know
the
if there's a
Democrats than it is the Republicans, right?
I don't know that there's any such. Well, first of all, let's back up. The coronavirus or COVID-19 is indiscriminate based on
Right.
partisanship.
But
It is indiscriminate based on
it's still
ethnicity.
the Democrats that tend to be controlling the people more so than the Republican states, controlled
I
states.
would I don't know what you mean by Democratic state or Republican state.
Controlled states.
I'm not sure I would categorize any state as controlled by any party. What I do recognize is
Well,
that every
California,
state.
for example, where I live, is completely controlled by Democrats. And they will not release the people because they want to take control of the White House again. And so they have the people in fear. And there are other states around the country where controlled by Democrats and they're keeping the people in captivity.
I don't know that I would agree with that assessment. The numbers are what they are, and the virus is very much akin, in my mind's eye, to mathematics. It's empirical. It is what it is. Once you test for it, and once you have a positive result there, the virus has got to be treated, and the virus spreads indiscriminately, regardless of partisanship, regardless of political party, regardless of ethnicity. It is absolutely an indiscriminate killer. It has been more adversely, or it has more adversely affected minority communities than it has white communities for a litany of other reasons, but it is indiscriminate. So I don't know that I would personally categorize any state as being controlled by Republicans or being controlled by Democrats, and any fear pandering, certainly on the part of Democrats.
Why do you prefer to call it coronavirus rather than Chinese virus since it's originated from China?
And I'm sure there are things that have originated from the United States, and I would not reciprocally want someone to identify something as something so negative as being from the United States. It is a virus that is airborne, and because of commerce being the way it is, because of Americans availing themselves in the stream of commerce and travel to China and making goods that are shipped to China and receiving goods from China, we are in frequent communication with China, both physical as well as technological. So with commerce being what it is and people traveling back and forth, it doesn't make a difference whether the virus originated in America or whether the virus originated in China. It is indiscriminately affecting people. So I would prefer to call it what scientists refer to it as COVID-19, which is a subspecies of the coronavirus, which has been around for a very, very long time.
But since we all know and it's been confirmed that it did originate from China, there's nothing wrong with calling it the China virus, right? The Chinese virus, right?
I don't see a reason to use an ethnic reference when we can use a scientific reference. It is a
I'm asking, is
subspecies.
there anything wrong with calling it the Chinese virus since it originated from there?
If that's what you choose to call it, you should call it
But
that.
there's nothing wrong
I
with it,
choose
right? I'm
differently.
just trying to figure out, is there anything wrong with that?
It's not my place to say one way or the other that it's right or wrong. What I can share with you is that COVID-19 is a subspecies. I'm using that term very generically. It is a subspecies of the coronavirus, which has been around as a mutation from bats for a very, very, very long time. The coronavirus is nothing new. COVID-19, this particular strand of the coronavirus, is new, is something that manifested in the late part of 2019 and obviously came to the United States in the spring or the early part of 2020.
How do you feel
So
knowing
I
that?
choose, and let me just say, if you don't mind, I choose rather than using a term of alienation or an ethnic slur, or term, I shouldn't say a slur, a term that can be divisive based on ethnicity. It is a scientific term, COVID-19, to specifically identify a strand of the coronavirus that is adversely affecting the world right now as a global pandemic.
How do you feel knowing that this virus, Chinese virus, created in a lab?
So I am sure that there have been scientific experiments that have gone awry in any number of ways. If you don't try, you'll never, if you don't, the mistakes result from efforts in trying. if you don't try, you'll never make a mistake and you'll never move the needle forward in making progress. So
Right.
regardless of where it originated, be it mutating from a bat or whether it was created in a lab, regardless of its point of origin, it is unfortunate that so many people have suffered fatalities. It's so unfortunate the way the virus has been mismanaged from the top levels of government in Washington. It's so unfortunate the adverse effects it's had, and it's exposed many of the economic disparities that are often associated with race in the United States. So there are a litany of things that are unfortunate about the virus.
What do you think the punishment should be for the government of China for not being honest about this in the beginning, that they had created this thing in the lab and that somehow or another got out, and they should have been honest from day one with the world about that? What should be their punishment for being deceptive in this Chinese virus situation?
I would respectfully question the source. As I understand, there was no clandestine attempt to hide anything. As I understand, folks were very forthright, and we eliminated a pandemic response office here in the United States at the highest levels of government. We decided to say it's going to go away as soon as the weather gets warm, and we decided to turn our heads and act like it didn't exist while it continued to mutate, continued to manifest, and
I know, but
continued to
what I'm
adversely
asking you,
affect
what
people.
should be the punishment for China deception? Because had they been honest from day one, it would not have gotten out of control. And now that we know it was created in a lab by China, they were not honest about it. How should we punish them for that?
I guess I have a different perception. My perception is not that there was any bit of dishonesty. My perception is that there was a very much forthrightness, and that on our part there was a desire to turn our heads and to say that this will magically go away as soon as it gets warm, and to dismantle an office for pandemic response that was in under the previous administration but dismantled under the current administration.
But it
So
sounds like you trust.
you're asking me about a punishment, and I don't see. I don't agree with the logic that the question is based upon.
It sounds like, and I may be misreading it, you trust a communist socialist society like China over American. Are you saying you trust China before you trust the American government?
I would say I trust individuals regardless of ethnicity or regardless of governmental affiliation. And I want to be very clear, I have every reason, based on what I have seen as an American citizen, as a former soldier, an infantry officer who served this country honorably. I have every reason to distrust the current occupant of the White House.
Do you trust the government, the government of China, the
I, I
Chinese
don't I
government?
don't
Do you trust them?
I don't know enough to make that sort of assessment. I'm
Amazing.
sure there are distrustful people, just like there are obviously some distrustful people in this government. I'm certain there are distrustful people in that government. There are distrustful people in every
But
government
I'm sure
because there
you
are
don't.
enough distrustful people around.
But I'm sure you don't trust China government at all. They're enslaving people over there. They're doing some horrible things to the folks, and they're a communist society, so they control the media and everything. So you don't trust them at all, right? Am I right about that?
I don't make blanket assertions. I have certain core values and fundamentals as an American, and I'm very proud of those values. I believe in liberty. I believe in freedom. I
But they
believe
don't
in
have that
choice.
in China.
I obviously believe in freedom of religion. So I am loyal to America because I love America. But part of loving America and part of recognizing that free speech means we can disagree without being disagreeable. And I profoundly disagree with many of the things that have come out of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue over the course of the last 4 years.
And do you
That makes
profoundly
me
disagree
that
with
makes
China
me
as well?
but hear me out. Hear me out. That has nothing to do with me distrusting or trusting China. That has everything to do with the fact that I consider myself to be an astute American who disagrees profoundly with some of the things that are going on in Washington right now.
How about China? Do you trust China at all?
I don't know that I'm ready to make that sort of assessment. I have reason to question any and everybody right now because there is so much unknown. There are so many fingers being pointed right now, and I'm an American citizen. I want to believe in my government, but the human in me says question before you believe in
But
a
I'm asking
situation like
about the
this.
Communist Socialist Society of China. They cannot be trusted because they control everything. So you have no trust in them at all, right? I understand what
That
you're
is
saying
a
about the United States government, but I'm asking you about China government. Do you trust China government at all?
that is a form of governance that I am not subject to. I am a citizen of the United States, and I'm proud to be a citizen of the United States. So how China operates internally is of no consequence of my own.
But you don't
I
trust them
am
is what I'm asking. You're not answering
well. I
that.
don't know. Trust is sort of a is a passionate word. Trust is a very loaded term. We have quote unquote trusted enough to engage in intellectual commerce exchange programs with students from China here in the United States. I'm a very proud graduate of Duke University. We have a campus there, and there's back and forth exchange programs with students there. So we have quote unquote trusted enough to engage in intellectual commerce. We obviously
But
have
now we
trusted enough to
regret that
engage
because
in
they're ripping us
electronic
off.
commerce. But my point being, trust is a very loaded term.
Okay.
Do I agree with everything that goes on in their government? Probably not. Do I agree with everything that goes on in my government? Absolutely not.
Do
So
you
trust is a
absolutely
very loaded
not
term.
believe in everything that goes on in China's government?
And I'm sorry, ask your question
Do you
again.
absolutely disagree with things of the China government as well, Chinese government?
I don't know enough about everything that goes on there.
Do
What
you
I can
know they
share with you is
enslave
that
people
I
over
can
there?
make a blanket assertion. I can make a blanket assertion that there are many things I agree with that go on in America, and there are many things that I profoundly disagree with that go on in America.